Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Tricked Before. This time, Unnatural Selection. Yeah, it sounds like a Skinamax movie from any time, but it's not. It's a TNG episode, and we're going to talk about it. It's All Been Tricked Before today. Who knows when you're listening to this? But no matter when you're listening to it, you can still go support us. Patreon.com/IBD. Drop a couple bucks, you get the bonus stuff, and you support us. And we love you, and we appreciate that. It's just another way to get us a little closer, but not too close. Unless you really want to pay a lot of money, then we'll do whatever you say. Kind of like, that sounds like Unnatural Selection, which is what we're talking about on this episode of It's All Been Trekked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. The regular crew is here.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome. And we're here to talk Unnatural Selection. First impressions.
Not my favorite. There's some familiar things that have come up in the past that I don't like. We'll get deeper into those later. It still had some moments, and we'll get into those as well. Not. I didn't hate it, I don't think, but definitely not my favorite. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Interesting.
Okay.
I really enjoyed it. I guess up to a point. I'm trying not to speculate too much on what Steven did or didn't like, but I think once it got in there, or once the episode started going, I had things I was picking at, or little ideas or theories, and I don't know. Maybe that might be the problem. But as I said, I guess I started off really liking it, and then something started falling apart, and I can't put my finger on it just yet.
I liked it. Wasn't my favorite either, but I liked it. Don't have any major complaints with it. I certainly liked it a lot better than the Deadly Years.
We'll see where I am at the end of this conversation. When I started the episode last night, my alternate episode was not the Deadly Years. But by the time I got to the end of the episode, my alternate episode was the Deadly Years. So we'll see. We'll see how I've got a couple other ones too, but alternate episodes, but we'll get to those later.
Was the Deadly Years original series?
Yes.
Yeah.
Were they rapidly aged?
Yeah.
So we start out here with Troy and Picard talking about Pulaski. And, a lot of people say, show us, don't tell us.
Yeah.
And the Next Generation chose instead to tell us that she's super dedicated. I've never met a more dedicated physician, which is not something we saw yet in the series.
Yep. Very, very stilted. It's very much like in the what was it, Okona, the Outrageous Okona, where they described him. It was very similar to that kind of opening, but except maybe even more stilted. But it was just like, okay, so this is going to be a Pulaski episode. We get it. But yeah,
I didn't mind the Pulaski episode. I like Pulaski. I thought she did well in this episode.
No, that part I don't mind.
I just wish they would have found ways to show us how dedicated she was to her job before this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we'd seen she's a pretty good doctor so far. I mean, I feel like, they could just continue to convince us of that. I didn't know we needed to hear it, but yeah.
Well, I think what we hadn't seen yet was that, I'm going to do this no matter what, because this is my job and this is my calling. And we do get to see that in this episode. But instead, we have this clunky explanation to us before we saw it.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say that the most stilted moment for me in it was a little later when Troy was talking to Pulaski in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
Where Pulaski was expressing not quite frustration, but confusion over how to avoid giving off the wrong impression to Picard. Like she was, she didn't like how they're getting along and was trying to figure out what it was that she was doing wrong exactly. And just something about that exchange, they weren't horrible or anything, but that is probably that felt like more stilted than the other things. I guess I was going to say the reason why they probably had to do things that way, of course, is just a sign of the times, the syndicated thing of they're assuming that people wouldn't necessarily have been watching all the episodes up to that point.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think that was a natural assumption back then.
And of course, even if they had been showing Pulaski's dedication in earlier episodes, they couldn't have counted on people to have known that. So
yeah.
Well, they weren't trusting their audience.
Soap opera thing.
They weren't trusting the audience. Trust the audience.
No, why? I don't know. I'm just saying they can do that nowadays, but back then they probably couldn't.
Right.
I mean, they could.
Yeah, and I think
they just chose not to.
Right.
And yes, it was a popular choice.
Yeah, and I think they knew the Trekkers. Yeah, the Trekkers were going to hang on every word, but they wanted to spread the fandom, obviously. So I think that's where it's like, okay, this is for the person that just wandered into the room, whereas they know the big Trek fans are going to be there. So yeah, I get it, but I feel like there's still a way to do it better. But what are you going to do?
What I did like about that Troy Picard scene at the beginning, though, was they're talking about how Picard's worried she's too dedicated to the job, and they're talking about that. But then Troy's like, "Oh, I don't think that," and he's like, "Well, why not?" And she's like, "Because I've spent time with her and gotten to know her, and I got total Troy shade being thrown at Picard, and I enjoyed that immensely."
That was actually a good line within the exposition. That was a good line, and a good form of exposition.
Yeah,
I think they've been consistently using Troy well this season.
Yes,
but,
agreed.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to the point where, and I'm jumping ahead a little, but I won't get into it deeply, but why doesn't every crew have a full Beta Z and their staff to read anybody they talk to and know what's going on? I mean, she's only a half Beta Z, and she gets a lot of information that the crew needs. If they had a full Beta Z on every bridge, I mean, come on.
If Khan had a Beta Z in Wrath of Khan, he'd have defeated Kirk. They would have sensed that Kirk was full of it.
But if Kirk had a Beta Z in Wrath of Khan, he would have sensed Khan before they pulled the sneak attack.
That's true. That's very true.
Well, I mean, it seems, a couple of reasons. One being, it seems like one of the justifications for following this ship and talking about how great it is because it seems unusual. The types of people they have in their complement in the crew. It seems unusual. They have a Klingon, unusually they have an android, and also a Beta Z. Even Geordi seems to be like this scientific marvel to most people that were meeting him.
Well, this is the flagship, the best ship in the fleet. That's why Pulaski requested the transfer there.
Right. So, yeah, I think that kind of helps justify. But also, whenever you have those backstory moments, usually when somebody meets their family, I can't remember if Loxana said anything to that effect, but it seemed unusual to them that a Betazoid was in Starfleet, or like the idea of most other races. It seems like more like a human type of thing that people wanted to do. And other races were sort of folding into it. Like maybe they think it's too militaristic or something.
Yeah, I don't know. So we then see the USS Lantry, which seemed like a weird, lazy name. It looks a bit like the Reliant.
I wrote exactly Lantry equals Reliant.
But it only had a crew of 26, and I'm pretty sure the Reliant had more than that, right?
I bumped on that because they said 26 officers and crew, which I thought was a weird way to describe it.
That's true.
So it's like, okay, so how many are in the crew, and why are you focusing on the fact there's 26 officers? Yeah. Why not just say there's 350 people or whatever would be on the Lantry? I just thought that was a weird way to describe it.
Speaking of names, the name of the station itself.
Refresh my memory. I didn't write it down. Darwin?
What was the Lantry?
Lantry was the ship.
That was the ship, yeah.
Wait, which ship?
The ship where all the people had aged and died.
Oh, right. Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm too far ahead. Yes, all right.
Yep. Yeah,
yes.
Darwin Station. Yeah, that makes sense because they're doing genetic experimentation.
And also the title of the episode, which I thought was funny. I think that was the closest they were going to come to the name of it, unfortunately.
Yeah. So to get on the Lantry or to figure out what's going on, Picard goes into his office and he spouts off an access code, which my question is, how many access codes does he have to memorize? How does he keep them straight in his head? It's like, because he had a different access code for blowing up the ship. And I don't know. I just, in my mind, I'm like, man, we have too many passwords today. How does he keep all those weird codes, straight?
That's a valid question.
I feel like that's part of the training. I mean, the captains are supposed to be exceptional, and that's probably one of his main jobs is remembering those kinds of things. So
he spends 3 hours a week just memorizing codes.
Was it the Lantry that they approached and they said there's no signs of life?
Uh-huh.
But there was, people were there, right?
Yeah, but they were
dead.
So if you're dead, you don't get life. So I guess life signals would be heartbeat, brain function.
I see what you're getting at. That is interesting. I mean, I guess.
And did it kill every mouse in the cargo hold and every whatever?
Right, barnacles, space barnacles.
Mm-hmm.
There were some other shorthand things they were saying too, or some of the conversations felt. I mean, I had to kind of step back and say, of course, this is just a 1 hour show, and they can't get into some of these minutia, and maybe they wouldn't think to back then. I probably wouldn't even picked up on it back when it aired, when I was much younger, but still, just that is a good point. Just the idea of the way they tend to use that term when they're scanning planets and so forth.
Yeah,
like organic life. I mean, so literally, did the thing have to be alive, or they're picking materials that could have been alive?
Well, they're generally scanning for intelligent life because obviously there's lots of animal and plant life.
Sure, yeah.
So how do they separate them out? I don't know.
But, right, exactly. I don't.
But they've got very sophisticated equipment, so I'll buy it.
True. But I mean, I really like the idea. I mean, I wrote that my first note was remote access codes! !
Well, we've seen those before.
I don't know. I guess
in the movies. But I want to know why we haven't seen them use that view screen trick before. I feel like that would have been useful in other episodes already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like they're not trying to take over the ship. Just turn on the view screen. Like just when earlier this season when they were in the hole in space outside of space and there was another ship and Worf and Riker beamed over and they did all that stuff. Why not just turn on the view screen and take a look without being over?
Awesome.
I don't know. I feel like by showing us such a nifty trick, it now hurts the franchise as a whole that they don't use that all the time.
Yep. I mean, there are, I guess, other things like that too that come up.
Oh, yeah. Now, I won't complain about the telling rather than showing when we find out that Pulaski has quite a reputation because I liked getting the outsider's perspective of, she's like awesome. I follow her work. She's fantastic.
Yeah, I wrote fangirling as exposition, and I am with you. I did like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made sense. I mean, that was Dr. Sarah Kingsley, played by Patricia Smith. And this was at the end of her career. She only has 3 acting credits after this, spread out through the 90s. But she's best known for The Spirit of St. Louis, The Debbie Reynolds Show, The Bob Newhart Show. So she had an active acting career that this was at the end of.
My favorite line of hers was, she says, "I just celebrated my 35th birthday." And nobody says anything. They're like, "Wait, are we supposed to compliment her? Like, you look really good for 35?" Or
except she didn't because she was
right.
Yeah.
No, it's funny. I mean, I actually kind of thought that was funny at the time because of the way that they didn't hammer it to death. They showed some glances. It was understood that this actress looks old for that.
Right.
You're supposed to know right away that this is a bad thing.
And there's also the idea that what planet is she from that she's 35? She looks like she's 80 Earth years.
She's from the Jack planet.
Part of it too.
She's from Planet Jack, where Robin Williams was.
There you go.
If we can back up a bit, I just realized I wrote like half of my notes about just that Lantry encounter now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For technology, so they have the remote access to the view screen, and I couldn't help but notice that the way that Picard was interacting with it, he was just saying magnify, and okay, closer, and so the computer's automatically going, zooms in on the right side of the screen on one face, and then kind of pans over for him, and then magnifies again, without him really explaining exactly what he meant for it to do, and it just seemed like that kind of.
It's a smart computer.
I suppose, but just I think another one of those kinds of writing or direction things where they didn't really think it through and it's just whatever. Also, they threw around the term, and I actually had to stop and look this up for a moment. Dying of old age, and it's something I usually think about very much, and somehow they just popped in my head this time to think. I mean, is old age a real cause anymore, like that far in the future? Because that's just a kind of a layman's sort of way of saying that there was some sort of organ failure or some other thing that that's related to complications of getting older, some sort of deterioration. But that's kind of a very broad term for a cause of death for them to just sort of throw that out there.
Yeah, maybe it's more descriptive for this episode. I mean, I would think they would say natural causes, which our can't think of quite the term. Our term for it that sometimes we like to use.
I think they said both, didn't they?
Well, no,
did they? Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's my point, though. Is yes, it's a very general way of saying it, though, because you would think that by that point people will probably live a very long time, if not just hundreds of years, because you will be able to stop any of those normal kinds of things. It's not just they just magically stop living, and there's usually some sort of failure that we know that in present time we couldn't fix, but by then they should probably be able to prop them up in some way. And I started freaking out because of the way that they just kind of threw around the whole flu thing. They're like comparing what had happened in terms of the flu still, like we are today, and bringing up quarantine. I just thought, oh my God, just the coincidence of it all.
There are a lot of elements of this episode that hit way too close to home. My first one was Pulaski starts talking about a quarantine. I'm like, weak Pulaski, come on, it's time to reopen the galaxy. You're talking about a quarantine?
Well, Riker needs his beard trimmed.
The galactic economy.
That's right.
Thank goodness.
I gotta get my tattoo.
They don't worry about money anymore in the 24th century, so they're good.
That's right.
Was Darwin Station a little too on the nose of a name?
Yeah.
That's what I noted again, just simply because I even said that's probably the closest they're going to get to the title line.
I felt like they were saying it weird too, like Darwin, or the way they're pronouncing it didn't sound exactly Darwin, or maybe I was just like, I refuse to believe that's what they're saying because it is so on the nose. But
well, it's on the nose, but if you're doing that kind of research, Darwin's probably a hero of yours, so it makes sense to name your station after him.
Yeah.
I just thought, I get the chills up my spine though when they talked about that they had genetically created the children. That to me is what felt weird and wrong, and I expected some of the crew to object to that and be like, what are you doing? You should be doing that.
That was also a strange exchange there, the line between Pulaski and the fangirl. Pulaski said, genetically engineered? She goes, no, genetically created. As if that is somehow, a better correction.
Well, those are two quite different things. I mean,
I guess.
I don't know. I mean, it certainly took some of the human element out of the children, the grown-up children, the fact that they were genetically created and didn't have a mother and a father. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, now that I think about it, you're right. I mean, as far as engineering, that does imply that they were trying to, like eugenics or something. But at the same time, they still, it seems like they must have been aiming for certain things, like the whole immunity thing.
Well, and by the underwear that guy was wearing that they beamed up, I think you know what they were aiming for.
That was my next question, because I wrote down, was he naked? Okay, he did have underwear on?
He did, but they were tight boxer briefs that left nothing to the imagination.
Yeah, okay.
You could see what was underneath them. And it
daring for 1988.
Being wrapped in that clear plastic has got to be somebody's kink.
Speaking of that, one of my notes was trying to figure out how they were doing that, because it didn't seem like he should have been able to, like the actor having to like just hold his breath and not fog up the thing, or I mean, how was he even able to breathe in it? I mean, it seemed like they couldn't have been shooting long enough or in short enough bursts for him to be able to do that.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
I mean, that was super close to his body.
Yeah.
I thought it was weird when they took the plastic off of him eventually, like the whole base he was laying on disappeared with it. Did you notice that?
I didn't catch. I was too busy watching the effect of the
it was almost
styrolite
like
dissolving.
Yeah, he was almost like on a foam cushion on top of the table.
Right.
And when they took the plastic off, that cushion disappeared beneath him as well. I don't know. I thought it was a weird effect, and I wasn't quite sure how that worked. Because on the other hand, if that plastic was just against the table, you'd think that air would get in and out. So it makes sense that there was an underneath piece too, but I don't know. But man, O'Brien's an expert transporter chief to be able to beam that plastic just ahead of him and to keep him in the plastic.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
They said he was beaming the plastic. I can't remember how many. Like I want to say it was like 2 microseconds before the person or something. He talked about it.
Oh, I missed that. That's awesome. Actually,
yeah. I was just like, well, that's I don't even understand how he's can do that. But I just chalk that up to future tech babble.
I noted I guess this also sort of goes to what you were saying at the beginning about them exposing like series level flaws in the sense of seeing the kind of precautions that they're able to do, or the way that they were talking about the things. It was interesting to me, because these are things that I hadn't thought about back then, things I didn't retain, the answers to the questions that come up for me as we go through this. Just the whole idea, again, they spell out that transporting should filter out certain kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But
and maybe we'll get deep into it now. It's part of my that's one of my bigger problems with this episode. And as I look through my notes, maybe I didn't dislike it, but the whole transporter things that it can do, as we discussed during the counterclock incident long ago, I have issues with. And this is the Star Wars Minute part of this podcast. On the Star Wars Minute, they talk about force creep, which has become a problem for me as well in the later movies. Like all of a sudden, you can do the
force can do too much.
Yeah. And that's my feeling about the transporter. It just seems like it's a huge leap to be like, okay, I'm going to buy that you can beam this up and all that kind of stuff, and the way we've experienced it through TOS and through this so far. And then when we start getting to the biofilter and all that, and we can go back and do this trace thing, then you can talk to me in the mumbo jumbo and everything, but inherently I'm just like, I don't like this. It seems too easy. And we've talked about, I can't remember if it was Counterclock Incident or another episode. We talked about, I think there's some ethical issues there. And we know the transporter is getting the hands of the wrong people, so I think there's some ethical issues, and there's, what does a biofilter check for? And because there's some races or species they're going to come in contact with that they're going to biofilter stuff out. And it's like, no, I need that to live and that kind of stuff. And, obviously you can collect information on that as you meet these races and all that. But I feel like, and now we're really getting into minutia, I guess, if we're talking about that. I just, I feel like it's an easy Deus ex machina. So I'm still gonna reject it. the trace thing, like the plastic ahead of the dude. I can see that maybe being a thing you fix. And I was watching Enemy Within last week, and the evil Kirk comes up and then he confronts their other Kirk and ends up shooting at him and missing him. And he ends up hitting a part that damages the transporter even more than it already had been. So it made me think, and now I'm jumping topics, but sliding into another topic. But we've talked about engineering needs more security. The transporter room needs more security, but do we think those two on the bridge should be the most secure places on the ship?
What do you mean? As opposed to anywhere else, or just?
I should say that not only getting into those rooms, but also the technology, because in Enemy Within, they're in the engineering area, which I guess makes sense. That's where the transporter actual machinery would be, and it goes up to whatever, a floor above them or below or whatever.
We need like a key card or like password authentication or something like that. Probably.
Somebody randomly shouldn't be able to shoot a phaser that goes off and it jacks up the transporter.
Well, that too, yeah. I see what you're saying. It could be probably shielded a lot better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought they made the transporter solution complicated enough that I didn't have a problem with it. Yeah. Other than the fact that they said, if it doesn't work, we can't beam her back. We have to beam her into space. And I'm like, if you can beam her into space, why can't you beam her back?
Right. I thought it was a false choice.
What do you mean? I missed that part. Maybe they were saying that it would be too dangerous to have her on the ship or something?
No, they said if it doesn't work, if the transporter thing doesn't work to de-age her, then she couldn't go back to the Darwin station. And the solution was they were going to beam her into space. And my question is, if they could beam her up into space, why couldn't they beam her back to Darwin station?
Maybe it was like a euthanasia kind of thing, or maybe it was...
Well, yeah, but... So here's the thing, no, they made it sound like it wasn't technically capable of beaming her back because it was a one-way trip. So maybe you're onto something there, Keith. Maybe it was going to kill her either way because of the one-way nature of what they were doing. So beaming her into space was a nice way to make it go quicker.
That would be my thought, at least. Or also, it could have been she would have just come as like some sort of abomination. Considering what they were trying to do.
I don't know, but I bumped on that. I didn't think of that they, maybe she was going to die, so they were being nice and beaming her into space. I don't know.
I didn't either, but that's an interesting take.
Yeah.
One other thing, and at this point, had they decided that animated series was not canon?
Yes.
Okay. That explains why when they said, this hasn't been done before, I'm like, of course it was. It was done before. Counterclock incident.
Oh, that doesn't explain anything, Steven. They contradict themselves within these episodes.
This is true, but I can't even explain it away. But I'm going to explain it away that way, but I still reject it. But
I thought this was much more believable because they talked about how complicated it was, and it was one way, and it was risky, and they weren't sure it was going to work. So I bought it a lot more in this episode.
Well, not only that, it was a really good way to start to elevate the importance of O'Brien, I thought. To the need to have somebody with that type of expertise. There was some creativity involved in what he was doing. There was just something about it was interesting, just the way that they were bringing it up. But
it still bothers me that he's Lieutenant O'Brien. I don't know when he becomes non-commissioned, but I did like that he was at the senior staff meeting with the lead characters.
I think they called him a transporter chief or something, didn't they? Or
they did call him transporter chief. He is the transporter chief.
Yeah.
But in very soon, it's his rank is going to be chief, and he's going to be a non-commissioned officer. Whereas for these first few episodes, he's wearing the lieutenant pips, and he's an actual officer in Starfleet. So I don't know why he would become non-commissioned after being commissioned. That seems like a big step backwards. And
I don't know. I was going to say I don't know enough about the military to.
In continuity, they just pretend he was never ranked; that he was always non-commissioned.
Well, I mean, what's the distinction between those types of things, commission, non-commission?
I believe the non-commissioned they are specialists in a certain technologies, like the transporter. So they don't go through the full academy. They don't go through all the things a Starfleet officer would get to. They were skilled at this technology already, so they brought them into the service to do this specific job.
So I did know about the transporter trace. Or I guess I just wrote oh my god, I'm excited about it. I guess ! But they're coming dangerously close to that whole idea that people talk about. Just sort of, I don't think they've ever gotten into it in the show in canon, right? I mean, just the idea of being able to just duplicate somebody. If they have that pattern saved, they could just replicate them.
I mean, so it felt like on this, they weren't saying they could just replicate them. They would use that pattern to help restore things that had changed within their body, but they still needed that person to be part of the beam up. They couldn't just make them out of thin air.
Interesting.
So it was more like fixing something within the body rather than building a whole new body, which would be a lot more complicated.
I think we talked about it last time with the biofilter, because my thought would be, well, why have a sick bay? Just send somebody down to the transporter room and get a trace on them and then do that.
I mean, that would work on some things, but I think it was pretty clear in this that it doesn't work on everything. It's very limited.
Now that I think about it, if somebody were to engineer something like that in real life, I guess what they would have to do, just for ethics, for no other reason or some other safety protocol, you would have to lock it in so that you couldn't do certain kinds of things. It would be too easy to just completely mangle somebody or kill them if you didn't have certain kinds of protocols in place that only did an exact representation of what was already there.
This would destroy the cosmetic surgery industry.
That too, yeah. So I think it would be too dangerous to have something like that in there. The amount of precision that would be needed to do something like that.
Yeah, and I guess if you can make a transporter, you can do this kind of stuff. But that opens, like we said, I think we just scratched the surface. I mean, you could do an entire series about where you end up going with this. And I think, Jim, that's a good clarification that you have to have at least the original body to and you massage it. But even that gets into the different elements there and the things you could do with that. So it'd just be a matter of time till someone figured out a way around that. But that's more a thing about science in the 24th century. But this is the alternate episode, is somebody going a different direction with all this transporter stuff.
I feel like anytime there's a major transporter plot point, we end up spending half the podcast talking.
I'm sorry. It's just I like this. I don't know. I start thinking about it differently every time, and I'm realizing that just thinking about imagining how you would have to program something like that. I mean, I don't think you could make it past a certain level of approval FDA or whatever would be regulating something like that without having those kinds of things hardwired into it. So you couldn't mess with it because it would be way too dangerous.
I'll be honest, I usually just suspend disbelief about the technology and don't think about it too deeply.
And there is an element of, if I'm going to try and say this in a clean way, there is an element of, if you've bought the transporter itself, you have to buy all these other elements of it. And I'm ignoring my own theater philosophy of that's BS, monkeys don't fly. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, I'm still going to hold on to it fiercely. But maybe I need to re-examine but I'm with you, Jimmy, to a great extent. A lot of it I'm okay with just being like, you know what, suspending disbelief is perfect because obviously we aren't watching beat tapes from the 24th century. So
otherwise it's really hard to enjoy this stuff.
Yes.
Well, some of the fun of it for me is doing that occasionally. Even when you're suspending disbelief, though, the problem gets into for the sake of writing things. Mm-hmm. You have to remain internally consistent.
Yeah.
And once you start picking things like that, then it is a problem. But again, there's a certain point where you have to just let it go. And usually I'm the person who does that. But I don't know. Maybe it's just me getting older or whatever. Just something about it just makes me want to pick at it more.
Oh, for the record, I'm not telling you not to pick at it at the podcast. That's absolutely fine. It gets me thinking in a way I haven't about the episode before. It just has been my instinct to ignore it. And maybe that started because I was so young when I watched it.
Right.
Well, there's plenty of young kids that pick it apart too. I don't know. The one thing I was thinking about in this episode is the doctor seemed to be, not Dr. Pileski, Dr. Kingsley seemed to be bragging about how young the full-grown adults were.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is that a good thing? Well,
that got a little creepy.
Don't you want to educate them and let them? It takes time for development emotionally as well as intellectually. Even if you breed them smart, I feel like you need that childhood and adolescence to build a full person.
Yep.
So
there's something like maybe it's just the way that we were raised to use a cliche, but just the idea of I guess there's something character building about having to go through that process of adolescence or being young and weak and then growing stronger.
You're not going to get a well-adjusted person if they come out at age 30.
What was I going to say?
Did you see any sparks between Pulaski and Picard in this episode? It almost felt like they were trying to make her a total Crusher replacement.
I didn't really feel that. It felt more like colleague to colleague, but
I think that's how it felt because of the acting. I think the script was trying to force a romantic undertone.
Interesting.
I just think Patrick Stewart and Diana Mulder didn't have the chemistry. They had good chemistry, but not the kind of chemistry the writing seemed to be asking them to have.
Oh, I know what I was going to say now. When you were saying before about having been younger when you were watching this, I think it's all, I keep overusing this phrase too, but sign of the times. So much has happened in the last 20 years as far as technology. Just we probably weren't capable of understanding like what we're doing right now, for example.
I don't know what you mean. I've always had an internet and a microphone and all that. Video conferencing.
Right. But yeah, the audience, the writers themselves, everybody, the actors, just they wouldn't have been accustomed to the idea of what they were imagining. Just we're so close to being able to do the kinds of things that they're doing up to a point where we keep getting closer, so that it just seems easier to find more efficient or more efficient ways to do what they were trying to represent, or just other logical inconsistencies with the way they chose to do things.
Back to what I was talking about, the sparks. While I didn't feel the romance, I did enjoy her ranting at Picard and then him saying request approved and then her continuing to rant.
Oh God!
I know that
was a great scene.
I know it's cliche and whatever, but I still enjoyed it. Probably I thought it was the way they acted.
I wrote down great scene. That was a great scene.
Yeah.
I think all the Pulaski scenes in this episode were great. All interactions with everybody.
Yeah. I almost noted the Family Guy trope that they had a running joke like that. Usually with Chris, Or they'll do that whole thing of they'll keep talking and go, what? Yeah. I love that.
I did think it was interesting Pulaski is going to use Data even if she doesn't like him. Like, she totally now sees the usefulness of him as a tool.
I noted something earlier. She said the word data and conversation, and it immediately reminded me that we hadn't really seen him much in the episode at all, if at all. Maybe he might have been on the bridge briefly at the beginning, but then I realized, wow, we haven't seen him like this whole episode. And then I thought maybe they were trying to keep him out of your mind, so it can be kind of like a surprise later that she thinks to do it.
I was a little disappointed we didn't get more banter between the two of them in the shuttle.
Yeah.
I mean, just as I was about to note, they brought it up. That they were trying to, drill in earlier in the season.
Yeah. She did get his name right, though. She's not calling him Data.
She did.
Well, I mean, there was a little bit. I mean, she was. I think I would hope by now that she is starting to that she's becoming more familiar with him, especially after like the Sherlock Holmes episode. That she doesn't feel the need to.
She didn't even think to ask him, like, "Hey, Data, would you mind joining me?" She was just like, "Yep, you're joining me because you're not going to get sick." Like, no, the common respect when you're bringing somebody along is to treat them one way, and she's treating Data like property, not like a person.
All right. I mean, there's still that. There was that
still bothers me, but it's part of her personality, and I like Pulaski overall. So
there was a great line. Now that you mention it, when she said something to the effect of "You are completely safe," and Data pointed out that that's not completely certain. I mean, there's no way to know that for certain, but
I like that as
casually
well.
put that on, moved on.
Yeah, I'm glad they dropped it, even if they just. I mean, I'm glad they brought it up, even if they just dropped it. So when they're beaming the boy to the shuttle, O'Brien goes to the sick bay instead of running the controls. What was that about? Like, he's the expert transporter chief. He just needed to watch the guy transport. I thought that was very bizarre. He set it up and then let his underling do it.
It made sense to me at the time, but I'm not. Now that you I can't think of what.
And something else I found very odd is when Pulaski attempts her test on the shuttle, it's 3 a.m. Picard gives the time, and it's just after 3 a.m. And all the senior staff are still on the bridge and on duty. That was a really late night.
It is. That's interesting. Why do you think they meant even pointed out the time? They don't usually do that, do they?
No, not usually. I don't know why they chose to make it 3 a.m. because there was nothing in this episode that made it feel like they all had to stay up past their bedtimes then, Later there was a bit of urgency that Pulaski was dying quickly, but this was before that when they thought they had plenty of time.
One of the strange things I noted are those little minutiae as far as the way that they're interacting with the transporter stuff. And it was the Data when he was on the shuttle doing the piloting thing. He did this little flourish with his hands. Like
that
just
becomes a key component of the character. He does those flourishes all the time.
I didn't notice that before. Just sort of like, look how good I am at doing this.
No, what that makes me think of is probably the most famous time he does that in the movie Star Trek Generations after he gets the emotion chip. And they ask him to scan for life forms, and he sings a song about scanning for life forms while he taps on the panel. But so it surprised me. I'd forgotten that he actually did it all throughout the series, not just when he's making up songs about scanning for life forms.
It's always good to see a shuttlecraft. I'm always excited when I see a shuttlecraft. And this one was. Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw the name Sakharov.
No,
I did not.
Yeah. So it was named. I'm guessing it was named after Andrei Sakharov, the Russian dissident who. He's the father of the Russian atomic bomb, more or less. But then later in his life, he became much like Oppenheimer here. He became an opponent of it, and was for disarmament and obviously the treaty talks and everything. And spent a lot of time in the Gulag and everything. But he wrote. I should be able to remember the book he wrote. He wrote a book about his experiences there. Right? Eventually, he did get out. Probably, I think he got out around this time. I think he lived this long. I need to research that before I start just talking, but I thought that was cool.
So he was a hippie.
Yeah. He was a scientist, and I would imagine he started working on it around the same time we had our Manhattan Project. So in his mind, it was for good. It was to stop the Nazis. And then, of course, it ended up as good as a weapon that can destroy the Earth that many times over can be. And then later, I think he realized, as he became more disillusioned with the way things were going in the Soviet Union, that kind of stuff, he was I'm sorry.
Just to clarify something you said, you said he got out around this time, even around the time of the episode airing?
Yeah, I think when Russia started to fall and all that, I thought he was still alive, and so he was able to become to do.
He died in December 1989.
Oh,
interesting.
This episode came out in
88.
No, it was 89, January 89. So he died later that year. So when he was still a year away from death when they filmed this. So
this episode probably caused it, then, you're saying?
Yeah, I think the episode killed him. Yeah. I think he saw his name on the shuttle and just fell over in shock. On the shuttle, though, so they uncase the boy and Pulaski immediately gets sick. Why does she then panic and say, beam him down, beam him back to the thing? She already has the disease and she needs to research it. So why did they have to return to the station? Why couldn't she just, later when she gets it, she's like, oh, I might as well go down, and that's fine and dandy. But why doesn't she just keep working on him? Why does she panic?
I don't know. I can see your point, but that's also a reasonable precaution to take if you don't understand the nature of the infection.
But she already caught it.
No, it could be doing further damage of some sort. It could be contaminating the shuttlecraft itself further. It could do something to data. Who knows what it's going to do? So
I don't know. I just kind of felt like, it's already been out of the bag. You can't put it back in. Mm. I did think it was very odd that the Enterprise, I think it was Picard, said, okay, our priority now is to get Dr. Pulaski and Data back. And I'm like, that's the priority over saving all of those lives of those people down there? Yeah, you're Starfleet officers. Aren't you supposed to be saving them?
Nope, yeah, that's the American way.
Yeah. At one point they say to save Dr. Kingsley, and I was like, save everybody. It kind of goes back to there's 26 officers and the crew. It was weird. It's weird. Those couple things popped up in this episode.
Pulaski not liking the transporter. That's another way she's like McCoy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought it was very odd. I was trying to rack my brain and think, did we never see her use the transporter in the first 7 episodes or whatever this season?
So Crusher never had a problem with that, right?
No.
Really?
Did you see the 3D chess set?
No, where was it?
It was when we were looking at the telekinetic kids, they were moving chess pieces with their mind. I was just excited to see a 3D chess set because I like the establish that Pulaski admired Picard for a while and that drawing the parallel between the two of them.
Yeah.
Which we kind of touched on earlier. I did think it was very odd that Pulaski did her final log on the view screen in front of everybody.
Yep.
just like Kake.
yeah, sort of. Kake on Universe Journey. Check out its Undone Radio Hour podcast. I liked Picard saying it's good to see you again and their embrace. Then I did like that Picard took the controls from O'Brien, had O'Brien monitor the complicated stuff, but was basically like, look, if we're going to kill her, this is going to be on me. Very Ned Stark, in the pilot of Game of Thrones, where he insisted on carrying out the punishment himself.
Is what a leader should do in most cases, you think.
Although then after that, Picard says, gentlemen, I think they're back on the bridge, and Troy's there, and he... Is it on the bridge? I don't know, but there's at least one woman in the room. And he says, gentlemen? Oh, yeah, it is the bridge. I'm like, okay, why are you being sexist? You're not sexist. What's going on here?
How do you feel about the policy of calling female officers sir?
Oh, that doesn't bother me at all.
No, I'm neutral on it as well. It just made me think of that whole thing.
I guess my opinion on it, because I never really thought about it before, was when Voyager started.
Right.
And Captain Janeway didn't want to be called ma'am.
She didn't want to be called sir.
Or ma'am. Well, say ma'am will work in a crunch time or something.
Oh, right.
Call me captain.
Yeah.
And so I started to think, with that military thing, you do say sir. I think nowadays they say ma'am, but traditionally it was always sir, even if it was a woman. And so, in Universe Journey, as you just mentioned, we make everybody call their superior officers sir, whether they're male or female.
I didn't realize that was an actual military thing. I thought it was just a Star Trek thing.
I mean, Star Trek based all their command systems off of the military, the Air Force specifically.
Nice.
Which makes total sense.
Yep.
I thought it was odd when they blew up the land tree, there was no debris.
Yeah.
It was totally vaporized.
I thought because they blew it up because it was diseased, right? Was that the idea?
Yeah.
In my mind, the parallel I drew with that was I felt like it was a bad idea to blow it up because I think there would be debris, and I think it would be like it would land on some other planet and could infect people. It made me think of kryptonite when Krypton blew up, and it all came here, and it was only obviously people from Krypton that bothered them if they were on Earth, but there are all those different kinds of kryptonite too. So I just felt like you don't know where that's going and what's infected and all that kind of stuff. There are way too many parallels in this episode to right now in America, but
they should have thrown a line in there about whether the virus would survive in space or not.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the things they needed to cut. Whether or not it would have been scientifically accurate, they needed to at least make some sort of show of having considered what would happen.
While we're talking about the virus, I thought it was interesting, or whatever it was, I thought it was interesting that in this episode, it turned out that the carriers were asymptomatic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you're killing me.
Literally.
By the time this episode airs, we'll be out of quarantine.
I like
because
that
we'll all be dead.
Oh, God.
Sorry.
Now what if you really are dead by the time this episode airs? Because we're a few months ahead at this point.
We'll be nothing. Wait, who's going to air it if we're dead?
I said you. I didn't say me.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Fashion.
I mean, I consider makeup part of the fashion here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
There was a scene where half of Pulaski's face was pink and half was gray, and it was really bothering me how it was like half done makeup.
Oh, okay. So it's like the high def thing of.
Yeah,
probably.
You think it was actually,
Probably, because we had like early aging Pulaski and older aging Pulaski I thought looked pretty good. But there was a middle stage where like her forehead was pink, but her eyes down was gray. And I was like, this just doesn't feel done.
Well, we really don't know how this disease affects everyone.
You beat me. Well, I was thinking about saying that, but.
I sure remember those boxer briefs the kid was wearing. I think the people on the station were wearing very utilitarian clothes that weren't of major note.
Yeah, that's the way I felt. Obviously, I didn't note them.
The makeup was. I did think the kids were actually dressed pretty strangely. If you remember when we saw them, if you go on the IMDb page, you can see the picture of them playing three-dimensional chess, and they're all wearing two-toned, they're wearing like a skin-tight shirt. But there's like a full overall piece over top of it. And some of them are like green and yellow, and some are blue and green, and some are tan and pink. It's just, I thought those were ugly and not to my liking, but I thought the scientists were dressed well.
Didn't catch it. I mean, now that you mention it, I remember just thinking to myself, though, that I didn't note it. Just toward the end of the episode, where they came back to the station and showed you a shot of the old men still at the panels with their backs to the camera, just still doing busy work. But I mean, I guess it makes sense that maybe they still had things they needed to do to make sure that the kids were taken care of when they died or something. But
yeah.
Yes.
But I did think I will say I think Pulaski's old age makeup was a lot better than any they've attempted thus far. There was a
definitely better than the Deadly Years, yeah,
and also better than what they did in the Next Generation season 1.
Oh yeah, with
that one guy.
Yeah.
Well, and McCoy, both.
Oh, yep.
But it might still be the same wig.
They give everybody the same wig no matter what. The actual same wig.
They only have one gray wig. I thought it was interesting they called Pulaski Kate. Catherine Pulaski.
Oh, yeah.
I guess that was a way to try to humanize her more toward the end to make it seem a little bit more tragic, or the emotion of it. They were just breaking that protocol.
So Janeway's first name is Catherine as well, Catherine Janeway, and I'm pretty sure her nickname is also Kate. So somebody likes calling Catherine's Kate over there.
Makes sense. And it feels better than a Kathy.
Or Cat. It had a very somber ending to this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Which I appreciated, given the...
I did kind of like the way they... I'm sorry.
I just said I appreciated it, given what had gone down.
Yeah, I was just going to say I liked the way that felt. Just something about the way they handled that destruction, even though it was unusually thorough without the debris. Maybe it's because the ship didn't have their shields up or something.
Or quite possibly because of what you said, that you want to vaporize everything. Maybe they turn their phasers up to vaporize.
Yeah. Riker did this thing, and I feel like he's done it some other times, but especially in this episode, I really hit on it. When Picard's talking to somebody on the view screen, it happened several times in the episode, he's standing next to him, and it looks like he's looking through his ear. He's looking at Picard. He's not looking at the person on the view screen. He's looking at Picard talk. It's slightly reverent, but also kind of weird. And is it reverent? Is he into him? Is he looking through his ears?
Oh, he's into him.
Yeah, it's just a weird, it's a little too far to be like, this guy's really cool. It's a little bit over the edge for that. They talk about force fields. They were going to use a force field, and someone's like, well, force fields can fail. We're not going to use that. Your holodeck fails every time we get in it. You don't stop using that. So I thought that was a weird reason to not use the force field.
Life or death situation, though.
Sure.
I guess the holodeck has tried to kill him a couple times.
Exactly. I like there's another scene. It's one of the scenes where Riker's looking at Picard's ear, where Picard was talking to the other captain. I thought that was another really good scene. There's another scene. This is the other Star Wars part of the podcast, or maybe it's not even Star Wars, just Planet Earth. Somebody wishes somebody good luck, and they gave a pause, and the way they said it sounded like, may the force be with you, which essentially may the force be with you is good luck. And then I think the other person responded with something that made me think of Harvey Dent in Dark Knight, which was essentially, we make our own luck. So I thought that for me, it was very not self-referential, very pop culture referential, although not intentional, I don't think in any way. I thought the shot of the Darwin station, there was a shot of it near the end, looked really good. I thought it was a great shot. It
looked to me like the same matte backdrop from an original series episode.
And that's possible, and maybe that's why I liked it. I thought that was really cool. So that's all my notes.
What about alternate episodes?
So the other ones I had, the crew, the crew that gets infected, they all go to the Golden Corral and eat. And then the other one was right now on Planet Earth. That was my other alternate episode, unfortunately.
My alternate episode is when Riker and Data are going through Pulaski's things. They start to put on her clothes. They find her drawer of vibrators. They really get into it.
That's a good one.
The comedy version of this episode. Keith, did you have any other notes or alternate?
I did think about the underwear drawer, actually, when they were doing that.
You think she came back to her room later that night like, who was messing around in my underwear? It's awesome.
Probably. I had one note, but also just the force field thing. I just appreciated the way that they were discussing it, and the idea of just they weren't willing to take any sort of risk to that effect.
Yeah.
Like Jimmy was just saying, it's just when you're dealing with something that did that to a ship, you don't want to just go, well, the force field should do it. You want to be like 100% sure.
Yeah. So I thought of it after we were talking about that. Steven said, yeah, but the holodeck tried to kill him. And I guess like the holodeck's the flu, where it only kills very few people. And the force field with the deadly virus is definitely coronavirus, where it kills a lot more people. So it's all about
parallels continue.
Right.
Yep.
But Jimmy, there's no difference between this and the flu, between COVID and the flu. It's just
except the death rate.
It's just from a different country.
This episode was directed by Paul Lynch, who directed 5 episodes of The Next Gen. This was his 3rd. He also directed The Naked Now and 1100101. We got a couple more coming up for him, and then he directed 5 episodes of Deep Space Nine as well. This episode was written by John Mason and Mike Gray, and they were both producers, but this was their only episode of Star Trek they wrote. And then other guest stars, we had J. Patrick McNamara play Pulaski's old captain, Captain Taggart. Did you like him?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know.
So.
Yeah, so he's best known for Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, 1941. Oh, also Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. He played Mr. Preston in Bill and Ted movies. He only has 43 credits, though, and none of them are Seinfeld, so
That's a bummer.
You can't be that good.
What bothered me, this is, again, another one of those nitpicky kind of science things you think about. When Pulaski was on the view screen talking to the other doctor, and the doctor was arguing with her, saying something to the effect of, well, we've already tested all the children. They've all tested negative.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought was, why aren't you asking more questions about, like, okay, how are you testing them? What are you testing for? How do you know what to look for? Those kinds of questions. It was sort of like, just, okay, whatever. And that goes back to this is a 1 hour show, and it's, 40 minute actually. And just, they need to get through the shorthand. And of course, the writer with varying degrees of experience might have just been using, again, the layman shorthand, but that bothered me a little bit at the time.
Let's. How annoying was Wesley in this episode? Scale of 1 to 10.
He was in it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't bother me at all in this one.
1.
Yeah.
So 1 all around. Okay, Steven, who's your annoyance of the week?
I know you guys liked her a lot in this, and I do too overall. But Pulaski just
really,
yeah.
My annoyance was the fangirl doctor.
Dr. Kingsley.
Yes, for the reasons I was saying, there were just a lot of just appeals to emotion and just very irrational arguments that she was giving for how safe things were. And obviously she ended up being wrong, not for the reason she expected, but that was kind of the point. It just seemed really sloppy the way that she just kept hammering home like how safe these children were.
I'm inclined to agree your elders.
I'm inclined to agree with Keith over Steven here, but I'm actually going to pick a third character, and that's the kid with the bulge that they beamed up, because he didn't talk and he was just annoying to me.
Yeah, that's a fair one.
He only has one other IMDb credit. This was his first of 2, so didn't make it very far. He was in a pilot that apparently didn't go anywhere, so that was it for him. Also, we need to our crush of the week. Anybody want to pick Dr. Kingsley or somebody else?
I'm sticking with whoever I'm sticking
Robinson?
with. Yes.
I'm going to stick with Salar, the Vulcan doctor.
Yeah.
Keith, are you sticking with her as well?
Indeed.
Ranking the episode. Since you brought up the Outrageous Okona, let's start there. That's in the middle at the moment. Better or worse than the Outrageous Okona?
I'm at better. I just like sort of geeking out about the transporter things usually. Okay. I mean, and it felt like this, when I think back, it felt like this whole episode was a vehicle to do that, in fact. And I enjoyed that part of the episode, so it's probably going to move this pretty high for me at least.
Yeah, I'll probably be the outlier on this one. I don't think I hated it. I just didn't love it. And I like Yoda for the Wookiees. I have warm feelings for Okona, so I would probably put Okona above it. But
you'd go below Okona? Yeah, I'm torn, honestly. The one below Okona is Loud as a Whisper, and I would go above that. Of course, I didn't like Loud as a Whisper. I would have put that lower than it ended up being. So take that with a grain of salt. The one above this is The Child. And I don't think it's as good as The Child. Yeah, I think I'm going to side with Keith though and put it above Okona, because I just really liked the development of Pulaski's character here and getting to see her do more.
That too.
So we'll put it as number 3 for the season of 7 so far. Unless I'm just assuming there because Steven wanted it to go lower. But Keith, do you have a strong argument on why you think it deserves to be above The Child?
It's probably in the realm of recency bias at this point. It's just the memory of The Child is fading.
Yeah. That's one that I did not have. I wasn't looking forward to watching it because I don't have good memory of it. And then I remember I really enjoyed watching it with you guys a few weeks ago, or separately because we're quarantined. But that now I'm already fading on it again. Next week, we are going to discuss A Matter of Honor, where under an officers exchange program, Riker serves aboard a Klingon ship whose aging captain seeks the unwarranted bloody retaliation for suspected Enterprise treachery. I'm just going to say this because I'm going to forget when we talk about this episode. I don't remember the captain being aging a plot point at all.
Oh, me either.
Aging?
I don't know. An aging captain, talking about the Klingon captain. I don't think that's part of the episode. I don't know why I think he has that in the description.
I guess All right. I have some ideas about why they might say that, and there were some other themes, but we can get onto that later, I guess.
Wow, I'm impressed, Keith, that you remember it that well from all those ages ago when you watched it. So we're gonna go watch it now. We totally didn't watch both of them together, and are gonna talk about it fresh here. And next week we'll be back to discuss A Matter of Honor. Until then, live long
and prosper,
and die of old age.
Oh, rather than dying of coronavirus.
Now we'll see. We will all see.
You'll see.
This episode is dedicated to the memory of Keith Jackson, who died June 2020.
Oh my God.
Keith, if you actually die, I can't leave that in, but at the same time,
you almost have to.
Right. And if you don't die, then I'm going to leave it in. It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?